Hello, my name is Jiso and I'm reading Master Dōgen's Shōbōgenzō. And we are still on Kuyo-shobutsu, which is making offerings to Buddhas, chapter 87, serving offerings to Buddhas even. And we're in the middle of a long quote from Nagarjuna. No, we're not. Sogi Ritsu, fascicle 33. At that time the Brahman attained indestructible belief. At once he set before the stupa a meal for the Buddha and the Sangha. Then King Prasenajit, upon hearing about the world-honoured one building Kasyapa Buddha's stupa, ordered 700 carts to be loaded with tiles, and he visited the Buddha's place. He bowed his head and face to the Buddha's feet and said to the Buddha, "World-honoured one, I desire to extend this stupa. May I do so or not?" The Buddha said, "You may." The Buddha told the great king, during a past age at the time of Kasyapa Buddha's parinirvana, there was a king named Good Fortune who intended to build a stupa of the 7 treasures. Then a retainer said to the king, "In a future age, people who are against the Dharma will appear and will destroy this stupa, acquiring heavy sin. Solely, I beseech you, great king, make the stupa out of tiles and cover the surface with gold and silver. If someone takes the gold and silver, the stupa will still be able to remain intact." The king, as the retainer advised, built the stupa out of tiles and covered it with gold leaf. Its height was 1 yojana, and the width of its front was half a yojana. The handrail was made of copper. After 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days, the stupa was built. After its completion, the king served offerings of incense and flowers to Kasyapa Buddha and to the Sangha of bhikshus. King Prasenajit said to the Buddha, "The king was abundant with merit and he possessed rare treasures. Now I shall build, but I will not be able to equal that king." Immediately he started building, and after 7 months and 7 days the stupa was complete. After completing the stupa, King Prasenajit served offerings to the Buddha and to the Sangha of bhikshus. The method of building a stupa. The base is 4-sided and surrounded by a handrail. The mound is of circular construction in 2 layers, with square tusks protruding in the 4 directions. The top is decked with banners and canopies and shows a long spire of rings. If people say that the world-honoured one, having dispelled greed, anger and delusion, still has recourse to such a stupa, for that they will acquire a sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, because the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called the method of building a stupa. Stupa construction. When building a Sangharama, that's a monastery or temple, first survey in advance good land to make into the site for a stupa. Stupas must not be located in the south and must not be located in the west. They should be located in the east or should be located in the north. The monks, north of what? East of what? The monk's land must not encroach on the Buddha's land, and the Buddha's land must not encroach on the monk's land. If a stupa is close to a forest containing corpses, and if dogs might carry in leftovers and desecrate the site, a perimeter fence should be built. Monks' quarters should be built in the west or in the south. Water from the monk's land must not be allowed to run onto the Buddha's land, but water from the Buddha's land may run onto the monk's land. A stupa should be built on a high and prominent site. It is not permissible within the stupa perimeter to wash or to dye robes or to dry them in the sun, or to wear leather shoes, or to cover the head, or to cover the shoulder, or to hack and spit on the ground. The kazaya is usually worn over the left shoulder with the right shoulder bared, it says. If people speak as follows, "Does the world-honoured one, already having dispelled greed, anger and delusion, still need such a stupa?" then they will acquire a heavy sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, because the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called stupa construction. Stupa niches. At that time, King Prasenajit visited the Buddha, bowed head and face at his feet, and said to the Buddha, "World-honoured one, in building the stupa of Kasyapa Buddha, may we make niches or not?" The Buddha said, "You may." During a past age, this is still the Buddha said, during a past age after Kasyapa Buddha's parinirvana, the king Good Fortune erected a stupa for Kasyapa Buddha, and in its 4 aspects he built niches. For their upper parts he fashioned images of lions and all sorts of colourful paintings. For their fronts he made railings. The niches were a place to put flowers. Inside the niches he hung banners and canopies. End of the Buddha's quote. If people say that the world-honoured one, having dispelled greed, anger and delusion, still takes pleasure in his own glorification, they will acquire a sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, and the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called stupa niches. Clearly we have seen that, in the state beyond the Buddha effect of Bodhi, to erect a stupa to eternal Buddhas and to perform prostrations and offerings to it is the usual method of the Buddhas. Episodes like this are numerous, but for the present I shall just quote this one. With respect to the Buddha Dharma, the existence school is supreme. I like the existence school. School that preaches that all things exist. That's amazing. May be interpreted as the lineage which, through Zazen, affirms real existence. Okay, that sounds less exciting. With respect to the Buddha Dharma, the existence school is supreme, and within that school, the Vinaya is most fundamental. The Vinaya was first brought to China by Hokken, after he had cleared a way through brambles and thorns to India and climbed a vulture peak. The Dharma that has been authentically transmitted from patriarch to patriarch is exactly in conformity with the doctrine of existence. Number 3. What was number 1 and number 2? Is that just a long time ago? And I've lost the thread. It's because it's taken me so many days to read this. What was number 1? I'm very confused. Oh, there we are. Back to paragraph 160. Among these, number 1, serving offerings to a person. Oh, that was right. Yes, it was the 10 kinds of service of offerings. 1, serving offerings to a person. 2, serving offerings to a Kaitya. And then he went off on a thing talking about Kaityas and stupas. 3, serving offerings to what is actually present. 4, serving offerings to what is not actually present, and so on. So, sorry about that. Number 3, to serve offerings to what is actually present means directly to face the bodies of Buddhas and Kaityas and to perform the service of offerings. Number 4, to serve offerings to what is not actually present means widely to perform the service of offerings to Buddhas and Kaityas that are not actually present. That is to say, both in their presence and not in their presence, we serve offerings to Buddhas and to Kaityas and stupas. We also make offerings to Buddhas and to Kaityas and stupas that are not actually present. Serving offerings to what is actually present acquires great merits. Serving offerings to what is not actually present acquires great merits, because the state is magnanimous and wide. Serving offerings to the present and the non-present alike acquires the greatest of great merits. Where does all this merit accumulate? Number 5, service of offerings performed by oneself means serving offerings with one's own body to Buddhas and Kaityas. Number 6, serving offerings performed by others to Buddhas and to Kaityas means causing others, if they have some small possession, not to be lazy in offering it. That is to say, regarding service of offerings by self and by others, we do either one equally. Service of offerings performed by oneself acquires great merits. Causing others to serve offerings acquires great merits. Serving offerings in the state of unity of self and others acquires the greatest of great merits. Serving offerings in the state of unity of self and others. Self and others is hyphenated. In number 7, serving offerings of property to Buddhas and to Kaityas, stupas and sharyas, there are said to be 3 kinds of property. Offerings of necessity goods, namely clothing, food and so on. Offerings of venerative goods, namely incense, flowers and so on. And offerings of decorative goods, namely all the other treasures, adornments and so on. In number 8, serving offerings of excellence, there are 3 kinds of excellence. 1, just devotedly to perform the service of miscellaneous offerings. 2, with pure believing mind to believe in the weight of the Buddha's virtue and to serve offerings accordingly. And 3, while experiencing the will to transfer merit and the will to pursue the state of Buddha, to perform the service of offerings. In number 9, untainted service of offerings, there are 2 kinds of untaintedness. The mind being untainted, being free from all transgressions, and property being untainted, being free from violations of the Dharma. Number 10 is serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. That is to say, service of offerings following realization. The effect is called serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. The Buddha effect is the state to be attained, and the practice of serving offerings which can attain that state is itself called attainment of the state of truth. Serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth is either called serving offerings of Dharma or called serving offerings of deeds. Within it there are 3 categories. 1, serving offerings of property, may be serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. 2, serving offerings of joy, may be serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. And 3, serving offerings of practice, may be serving offerings of the attainment of the state of truth. The service of offerings to Buddha includes these 10 services of offerings listed already. For Dharma and for Sangha, similar categories also apply. Namely, to serve offerings to Dharma means to serve offerings to the teaching of principles and the methods of practice that the Buddha expounded, and also to serve offerings to volumes of the sutras. To serve offerings to the Sangha means to serve offerings to all sacred beings of the 3 vehicles, and to their Kaityas, statues and stupas, and to monks who are common men. Next, the mind in serving offerings is of 6 kinds. 1, the supreme mind of the field of happiness. Within the field of happiness, it produces great excellence. And there's a footnote suggesting that the state of happiness suggests the state of Zazen. 2, the supreme mind, which recognizes benevolence. All virtuous joys have appeared by virtue of the 3 treasures. 3, the appearance of the mind that is supremely excellent among all living beings. 4, the mind that is as hard to meet as the Udambara flower. Symbol of the Buddha's state of mind because it's rarely encountered. 5, the singular and independent undivided mind, which is one with the 3,000 great thousandfold world. 6, the mind which in all worldly areas and areas beyond the world is completely equipped with reliable criteria. For example, the Tathagata, being in complete possession of worldly and world-transcendent methods, is able to provide for living beings a basis upon which to rely. This is called being completely equipped with reliable criteria. If with these 6 minds we serve offerings to the three treasures, even if it is only something small, we will be able to secure countless and infinite merits. How much more if that offering is plentiful? Such service of offerings we should perform unfailingly with sincere mind. It has been performed without fail by the Buddhas. Stories about it are evident throughout the sutras and the Vinaya. At the same time, the Buddhist patriarchs themselves have personally handed down its authentic transmission. Days and months of waiting in attendance and doing work are just times of serving offerings. The standards for placement of statues and shariras for serving offerings and doing prostrations and for building stupas and for building kaityas have been authentically transmitted only in the house of the Buddhist patriarchs. They are not authentically transmitted to anyone other than the descendants of the Buddhist patriarchs. Further, if standards are not authentically transmitted in accordance with the Dharma, they will contravene the Dharma standards. When the service of offerings contravenes the Dharma standards, it is not genuine. If the service of offerings is not genuine, its merit is spare. Without fail, we should learn and receive the authentic transmission of the method of serving offerings, which accords with the Dharma. Zen Master Raito spent years and months tending to the site of Soke's stupa, and the temple servant Ro, not resting day or night, pounded rice to serve to the assembly. These instances were entirely the service of offerings in accordance with the Dharma. They are a very small sample of such instances, which I do not have time to quote extensively. We should serve offerings like this. Shōbōgenzō Kuyo-shobutsu, a day during the summer retreat in the 7th year of Kensho, which is 1255. Again, this is one of the chapters of the 12-chapter edition of Shōbōgenzō, similar to that of 86, with Master Dōgen adding brief comments to the excerpts from sutras. Master Dōgen died in 1253, 2 years before this concluding note was added, presumably by Master Koun Ijo. Thanks for listening. Take care.